Um, and yeah, there's lots to talk about with Chris. So let's kick off. Chris, thank you for being here today.
Thanks for having me.
Do you want to tell us a bit about yourself and your business?
Yeah, sure. So I wear a couple of different hats. So I'm a partner and one of the co-founders at Tacit Legal. So we're a tech and media boutique firm in the UK. I'm also my kind of baby that I spend most of my time working on is Tilda, which is a kind of AI native legal service. And then my side project, which is probably the most relevant thing for today, is vibecode.law, which I launched with two other people back in January, which is really I guess, a community project for promoting vibe coding, giving people a place to kind of learn, share, and discover what other people are up to.
Okay, cool. And let's just go straight into vibecode.law. Firstly, what an amazing domain name. I can't believe you got that. But then my other question is, why did you do it? Why did you decide that it would be a good idea?
The very honest answer, which is not the one that ever goes in a press release, but exactly what you just said. We couldn't believe that the domain was available. Myself and Matt were literally at the pub, saw the domain was available. Like, that's such a great domain, we've got to buy it. And then bought it and thought, right, now we need to do something with it. So yeah, and then yeah, so we, looking at the kind of LinkedIn sphere at the moment. There's so much kind of polarized debate, I guess. One hand, you've got people saying, oh, vibe coding is such a great thing. Like, you can just build Harvey in a day, and it's the death of legal tech. And on the other hand, you've got people saying, vibe coding is a complete waste of time. It's never going to be useful to anyone. We just think there's a place, like most things, the right answer is in the reasonable middle ground. And yeah, we just kind of wanted to build a platform that promoted that reasonable middle ground, I guess.
What is the reasonable middle ground?
My view, I think vibe coding is what Figma was 6 years ago. So if you've ever been involved in designing a product, in years gone by, people would have built a load of kind of Figma wireframes, but it's effectively an image that you can click on. It's not a working app. And that process might have taken 2, 4, 6 weeks, even depending on the complexity of the prototype. I think the real use case for vibe coding, at least where it is right now, for kind of non-software engineers, is getting hands-on and building that prototype in 5 minutes, 10 minutes, an hour, maximum a day, what would have previously taken 6 weeks. And I think that's the real golden use case at the moment. It's bringing the people who actually have the problem closer to um, having a design and what the solution looks like.
Yeah. Okay. And what are you seeing? Just moving away from vibe coding for a minute, what are you seeing in terms of, because you work with legal teams through your through Tilda and Tacit Law. What are you seeing in terms of their use of AI?
Um, it's a really mixed bag, actually, and I think if you looked on LinkedIn again, you'd kind of assume that if you're not using much AI in the legal team, that you're you know behind everyone else, and I just don't think that's true at all. I think the minor, and honestly, this is all anecdotal based on my own experience, but I would say actually the number of teams that actually have access to a legal specific tool is, I'd still say, relatively in the minority.
Hmm.
Um, or even have budget to buy a legal specific tool. And that there definitely seems to be still quite a big disparity between, what CFO is saying to general counsel about, hey, your team needs to be using AI more, and actually being willing to give them the kind of budget and headspace to actually go away and do it. Um, I'd say like the biggest use tends to be that we see is in-house legal teams, they've kind of got access to their companies, Microsoft 365 Copilot subscription or their G Suite Gemini subscription. And there's like kind of some use in the team, but not necessarily consistent. But like kind of in the like the experimenting kind of stage of AI. I think it's probably what we're seeing the most.
Yeah. Just for anyone who's not fully aware, what is vibe coding? What does it mean?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. We probably should have started with that one, shouldn't we? It's effectively building working applications with natural language. So in the same way that you would go to ChatGPT and just chat away with it, literally just having a chat with an LLM whilst it's building an app for you in the background without ever having to touch code. And this is way beyond kind of what like low code or no code platforms that people might have played with 4 years ago. You can actually have a working app that you can go and click on, put real data into, not necessarily recommended, but you can put
Yeah.
real data into and actually have a working app in yeah, 5-10 minutes from a handful of prompts.
Let's touch upon the not really recommended. Why not? Why would you not recommend that someone, maybe you do recommend this, is it wise for someone to go ahead and build a contract review or contract management system in Claude and then feed it all of its 1,000 contracts that it's signed with other parties?
Yeah, my one of my co-creators of vibecode.law came up with a great analogy for this. And he talks about cooking for your family versus cooking for friends versus running a restaurant. If you're cooking for your family, you know, I'm not saying you want to give them food poisoning, but you're not going to be as conscious about it. If you've got friends, then again, like you risk being the guy that everyone's at the butt of everyone's joke for 2 years. So you're probably slightly less likely to, sorry, slightly you're going to be slightly more careful about giving them food poisoning. And then if you're running a restaurant, it's table stakes. You're not giving people food poisoning, full stop. And I think that analogy is great. And then to put that into context of vibe coding, if you are building something that only ever touches your own data, your personal data, um, that isn't that sensitive, you can probably take a few more risks, and you don't need to be as kind of safety conscious, I guess. The minute you start, using company data, you need to be a bit more careful. And once you start using client data, you need to be even more careful than that. Um, and it's just, vibe coding is great, but at the end of the day, it's not a software engineer. There can be, security vulnerabilities in the code, and then also how it's deployed. So yeah, I think for really security conscious use cases, you do need to be a bit careful, but that's not to put you off. It's still a great tool for prototyping and kind of low data risk tasks or use cases.
So, what would you be prototyping for? Is it to understand what the solution is that you need to go and buy? Is it because you're considering building in-house and getting the resource to do that? Why would people, apart from the fact that it is really fun and addictive, and I vibe coded some prototypes for our product team the other day to say this is how I envisage this feature, and it was just such a quick way of me taking what's in my head and putting it into something that is workable. Not only that, by doing that, I had the opportunity to sort of push the boundaries of what I was thinking and really evolve my thinking because it would just give me other ideas and it would inspire me. And then I say, no, I want it this way. And then I can take that and package it and give it to the product team and they can tell me how wrong it is on so many levels because I didn't think about this interdependency, etc. But then it's just a very good way of communicating what's in someone's head who's not a software engineer so that you can create something that someone else can consume. But if you're an in-house legal team, what would you use vibe coding for? What's the use case in your view?
Yeah, so I think there's a bunch of use cases beyond building something that you're actually going to deploy, and that I would say they're all equally valuable, if not more valuable. Um, so I think one of them is just to learn, to be quite honest. There's nothing like getting hands-on with a bit of technology to like help your understanding of it. So like if you don't quite understand how a particular app works or how you get from A to B, then actually just building a prototype of that app yourself, even if it's an app that already exists, you will come away from that with such a better understanding of what it was. And
Mm.
um, so I think that's a great use case. I think second, if you're kind of going out to market, you don't quite know what it is you need, but you've got a really sorry, what products serve your need. but you've got a really good idea of what it is you need it to do, then you can vibe code up a prototype in, half an hour. And instead of going to a vendor with a bunch of, requirements, you can say, hey, this is what we need. Like, how much of it do you guys do? Versus, what can't you do? And I think it's just such a great communication tool, whether you're building or just dealing with a third party vendor and kind of going through a process. And I think that's particularly true for like big things. We've no doubt we've got a bunch of tech lawyers on this webinar, who, 10 years ago you would see massive, great big customer requirement documents, 200 pages long, asking vendors to go through and to, tick which of the features they can do. What a nice way to get around that, to actually just build the thing you need as a prototype and use that as a tool in your kind of RFP process. I think so yeah, I think there's plenty of reason to be doing it beyond actually wanting to deploy what you've built.
Hmm. Hmm.
And actually, the biggest use case we've actually seen where people are using what they've built in-house, from submissions to vibecode.law, is training use cases. So like simulators and things of, how can we help a junior lawyer build their negotiating skill. So we actually had, I think it was Michael from Duro, the GC at Duro, who submitted um, it's literally a voice assistant that a junior lawyer can negotiate with, and then it will give them feedback at the end as to how they dealt with the different issues. I think that's such,
Yeah,
so much of the
great.
discourse is around, AI is going to destroy junior lawyers' jobs, and that's such a good use case of how AI could be used for good for juniors.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's one that gets me excited if you can't tell. But
Yeah, no, definitely. And someone's saying that intake is one of the use cases for in-house for building automation. Yeah, I mean, we've seen in-house teams use Jira for intake. They've used just Google Forms. They've used Slack. So I think that's quite an established muscle, building something in-house that's meant for internal consumption. Back to your analogy, which I really liked, by the way, about the cooking. Um, and yeah, I think that there are definitely use cases for vibe coding that would support in-house functions. I think reporting could be one of them. We vibe coded a tool at SimpleDocs called Simple Cats, and we use it to do reporting from the various data points because we have so many data points that we just wanted to consolidate all of it into one platform. It's not going anywhere, it's just staying with us. So it's secure from that perspective. So I think anything inward facing is a really good use case for vibe coding. Chris, can I ask you to show us vibecode.law?
yeah,
Um,
sure.
can you share
This is
your
where
screen?
good.
Just give us a little tour, because I think what would also be interesting for people is to see the types of cases that people are building for.
Yeah, no problem.
Whilst you do that, I'm going to read out a question from David. What is the output from a vibe coding session? Do you get a .exe or a .msa file that you then install to run? Or is this something that runs in the context of your AI chat interface? Chris?
Yeah, it's a really great question. So, I'd say most of the vibe code platforms, the output is a web application. So it's, something that will run in your browser. Um, Usually it will be running on like a cloud instance. So you're not deploying it onto, it's not running on your laptop, it's running in the cloud. That said, you could use something like Claude Code, which more of a bit more of a software engineer pointed tool to build something that is a .exe. And actually, back to your point about reporting being a really great use case. I mean, there's different degrees of vibe coding, but arguably you can actually vibe code within your existing chat application. So I can't remember what they're called in all of the apps, but in Claude they're called artifacts, where you can
Mhm.
basically you could give it a load of data and say, please, can you visualize this data for me? I want to be able to see graphs that do X, Y, and Z. And it will produce a little artifact, which just
Mhm.
literally just runs on your laptop. And you can share that internally via Claude. I mean, arguably that is vibe coding in itself, and it's probably the most secure, nice packaged version of a vibe code app you could do.
Yeah. Awesome. Okay. Did you get access to share your screen?
I hopefully,
Yeah.
can you see that?
Yes.
Perfect. Um, yeah, so vibecode.law, there's really kind of three main bits to it. We've kind of got the main showcase, which is kind of like a product hunt type setup. So people upload their projects, the community can kind of upvote on projects, and then at the end of every month, we kind of announce a winner, and soon we'll be having prizes for those winners as well. And then if I just open up one of these, the submissions effectively, it's a product showcase effectively. It's you can provide your LinkedIn profile, GitHub link if you've decided to open source your app, some photos about the project. And there's an optional section that we can put on here is like, what help do you need? Do you need do you want the community to reach out and help you with anything? Um, so that's kind of the real core of it. But then for those people that um, they really want to get involved in vibe coding, but they're not quite sure what their first idea is, or they want to try it in a bit of a safe environment with something that's not like too worky. We have this like inspiration board where we post challenges. So we've got I was just saying before, the most popular thing we've seen is legal training. So we kind of have like a kind of a sub competition in here with how might you help train lawyers to verify, critique, and prove AI generated work. And yeah, this has been quite interesting to see what people have done with these. And then the third bit and the third and final bit we have is this what we only launched about 3 4 weeks ago is our Vibe Academy, completely free. And we publish we're publishing courses on there. So this one is the easiest starting point if you're thinking about vibe coding. We have this build your first app course. And it literally in the space of about 25 minutes, you'll have a working vibe coded app by the end of it. So yeah, just trying to give people make the barrier to entry as low as possible for people who are thinking about jumping in.
That's awesome. I love this. I'm going to go into this myself. It's come a long way since you first launched. So
Yes,
I
yeah. I
think,
think when we first launched, it was just a little list of projects, really.
yeah, no, it's brilliant. And I think that it's just such a good way for people to go in and learn more and find inspiration of what they might get involved with. And also uh, understand where the point comes where doing it yourself no longer works and being quite confident about that boundary and about where you now need to go and think about buying something that's more enterprise grade versus building. So there are certain use cases where vibe coding is perfect and certain use cases where you just want more reliability. I've just been really interested in Claude and what Claude has just launched for lawyers. So I'm sure everyone on this call knows this, but Claude recently launched a word add-in. And I think instinctively lots of people were thinking, oh God, this is the end of contract review word add-ins. And if you can buy something if you can get something from a tool that your organization is already paying for, then why would you go and do it yourself? And actually, Anna Guo, I don't know if you follow her, but if you don't, she's
Mm.
amazing and she does loads of very interesting, insightful videos. She did one of she reviewed the word add-in and she had some really interesting insights as to kind of where it worked and where its limitations were as well, and how that works for enterprise and actually where it doesn't. So, Chris, what were your thoughts on the word add-in?
Um, I think it's a really cool thing. I think the reaction to it was a bit of a storm in a teacup. I think it's really cool. It's really good. I'm already using it. It's great. Um, but ultimately, and this isn't to say that it's going to stay there. Claude may go further with it, but it's not going to replace tools that are designed for specific jobs. You think about like the work around the work. Um, you know, I think there's still going to be a place for like legal specific word add-ins which are really geared to one use case, and the user experience, the guidance it pulls in, all of that kind of stuff. Um, there is huge value in that beyond just having a chat window in Word. Um,
Yeah,
but that said, I think very conscious. Like not everyone's got the budget to buy a legal specific tool. I think it's incredible that how far you can now get without having a legal specific tool. And I think we'll see it's just another way to make what Claude released, 2, 3 months ago. Now it's hard to keep track of when everything was released because it's all coming so quick.
yeah,
But they release skills and plugins. So actually, it's a way that you can now build a skill which is effectively a reusable prompt, really, and deploy them across your team so everyone's using the same prompts. Like that's a great win for people who don't have the budget to go and buy a legal specific tool.
yeah. And I think that if you're a team that doesn't have the budget, if you're a one person band and you want to experiment with kind of how far you could get, it's really great for that. Um,
And
sorry.
it's a really great for as well, I think, understanding where the the kind of where LLMs typically fall short, because even if you do that, then go out and buy a legal specific tool, you're going to be much better equipped to ask the right questions, I guess is what I'm saying. So,
Yeah.
if in your experience it's been really good for X, Y, and Z, but actually it's failed quite a lot on B and C, then you can go to a vendor and say, look, this is our experience. Like, how does your tool help with B and C? Because that's where we're really struggling. And
Yeah.
that's a really, really powerful thing.
Definitely. Um, the other thing that it sparked was a thought around the conversation. Actually, Claude releasing this isn't making it easier for legal teams, it's making it harder because, and vibe coding in general is making it harder because before, when you wanted to get some technology, um, you would go through a procurement cycle, right? And that was quite a familiar cycle. You'd go out to the market, you'd draft your RFP, you'd do a feature comparison to see what works, what doesn't work for you. But now you've got this other decision. Shall I just build it in-house because no one's giving me the budget? And I think that that's just it is more complicated. And if we look back to the cloud example of what was that 20 years ago when cloud became a thing and everyone then wanted to move to the cloud. I worked for a big a multinational organization back then. And we, of course, hired IBM, Accenture, KPMG, EY, Deloitte, and PwC to do this migration for us, all at the same time, because we
Yeah.
didn't we didn't want the risk. I mean, technically, we had the IT team to do it, but no one wanted to be accountable for it. You could do it. AWS and Microsoft, they'd all publish their documentation. So technically, you could do the migration yourself, but most big organizations decided not to do that because they want to outsource the risk. And I think there's a conversation to be had there around when you decide to build and to roll it out to your enterprise, not necessarily to your small legal team or small law firm either, but to put in an enterprise scenario, are you able to take on that accountability? What does it mean in terms of the muscle and the capability that you need to build in-house? Do you actually need to hire? Is the cost of that hire um, going to be proportionate to the money that you're saving or the budget conversation that you're going to have? Is it actually going to become a harder budget conversation because hiring a person perpetually is a much different scenario to buying a software license? So I think there's that element that isn't really being addressed because everyone's just so enamored with the fact that this capability exists from a tool aspect. And I don't think I mean, it's great that it exists, but I don't think that it's a huge evolution from where it was. It already did some really powerful stuff. I think it's a different type of conversation around accountability and appetite for in-house teams.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I completely agree with every word you just said. Yeah. Um, I think there's putting aside vibe coding for a minute, the thinking more broadly. I think there's huge opportunity. I mean, and this all comes back to does if the in-house team has time within what they're already doing, because we all know in-house teams are firefighting left, right, and center. Um, but being able to deploy, say, legal team skills, which theoretically you guys could maintain yourself. it's not a big technical fee. It's natural language. It's a reusable prompt effectively. That is one thing I think that people can do very easily if they can find the time to do it. And it's quite easy to maintain. I think as soon as you start going into, well, actually, we're going to build an application that accepts data and it's got to store data. Um, there's so much beyond building the app. Um, I guess the analogy would be, drafting a contract is one thing, giving the advice, negotiating it, doing all the stuff that goes around the contract. You know, if it, the analogy is the vibe coding is only writing the contract, it's not doing all of that other stuff. So yeah, I think if you're actually going to deploy something that's, substantial within your organization, you do need some capabilities that no legal team or other than the very, very biggest legal teams have around, software engineering, development, someone who's actually going to go in and remember to patch the thing, update it with security updates and whatnot. So there is a whole different operating model that you have to put around maintaining and running an app, which, yeah, as you rightly allude to, I think is way beyond the realms of what most legal teams are willing and able to do. And I think that's why I think it's really important to just understand what vibe coding is for what it is. And in my eyes, at the moment, that's a great prototyping tool. It's a great way of communicating ideas. But it doesn't mean you're going to be able to, build an end-to-end solution and deploy it within a week. I think that's a very, very different um, challenge.
Yeah. What are you seeing in, if anything, of course, in other business units within organizations? How are they utilizing vibe coding? What are marketing teams doing? Have you heard anything? What's finance doing?
Yeah, so I think so. Finance is an interesting one. I've seen quite a lot of people playing with, and again, this is debate. Depends what you want, where you draw the line on vibe coding. But I've seen finance teams kind of using it in Excel. Claude released an Excel plugin, 2, 3 months ago, to just kind of break away some of that kind of monotonous work of like putting together a financial model or whatever, doing all of those formulas. No finance person enjoys doing that. So actually using the Claude plugin for Excel kind of lets them get further. And then the use case we mentioned earlier, I've seen a fair amount of discourse about kind of using Claude to kind of create visualizations, which
Mm,
otherwise, would have spent like a day in building something in Tableau or Power BI or something.
yeah.
Um, so I think marketing's an interesting one. I think I wouldn't say necessarily I've seen much in the way of kind of vibe coding, but using LLMs more broadly to help with kind of everyday content tasks and using skills and what have you in Claude to to I guess really standardize some of the kind of content production stuff that they're doing.
Yeah.
I mean, the biggest one, and it is obviously software engineering. So, interestingly, so the guy that coined the vibe coding term was about a year ago. Originally, engineers were using vibe coding as a word. Yeah, about a year ago, but they've actually distanced themselves, I guess, from the word, and they're starting to call it agentic engineering to kind of
Hmm.
reflect the fact that there is a human that's kind of architecting the thing and they're using AI to kind of execute the writing of the code. But I'm a developer myself by background before I was a lawyer, and I still do a fair amount of software engineering, but the the change is just incredible in the last 6 months. You know, even building a real application, what would have taken me 5 days in October now takes me a day. Um, and interestingly, I've not actually found myself using that time to do more engineering. I've used that time to kind of do better engineering.
Mm,
Um, Mainly because I think you just run out of mental energy. There's only so much mental
yeah.
energy you have. And necessarily, having the time to do 5 times more is one thing, but having the mental energy to do it is another.
Yeah.
Um, but yes, that's quite an interesting analogy for legal as to where things are going. I
Say
don't
more
think it
on that.
necessarily
I think that's a really interesting thread. So yes, can you elaborate on that?
on the mental energy
Yeah,
piece.
yeah, because I find that so much now that I use AI for absolutely everything.
Yeah, I think there's a couple of different bits there. So I think again, Matt, one of my co-creators of Vibecodes, started calling it combobulating breaks. I don't know if you've ever used Claude Code, but whilst it's working, it starts talking about
Yeah,
combobulating.
yeah, yeah.
Um, but yeah, we were talking for a while, like what are you doing when it's combobulating? And he was task switching quite a lot. So whilst it was working, he would go and try and do something else, and then he just kept losing his train of thought and what have you, as you would, so much context switching. Um, I've been taking a completely different um approach to that. So when it's combobulating, I'm thinking about what I'm going to do after it's finished rather than trying to context switch. So I think it's a completely different way of working, and I don't think you can really understand it until you try it. And I think everyone's brain works differently. But I really struggle with kind of like trying to paralyze myself and trying to do five things at once. It just
Mm,
doesn't work for me. And I don't think it works for a lot of people, to be honest.
I agree. When I've had a day of using AI to do multiple things, like first of all, we've written a skill on Claude that helps us draft playbook rules. And so we use it for that. And then what if I'm waiting for a playbook to be written, which might be 170 rules, takes ages, right? So what am I going to do in that time? So I start to now review a contract. So I'm now doing that. And then I'm using AI for that. So now that's working and doing its thing. Cool. Now what shall I do? Let me write a blog. So again, I'm going to go back to another AI tool. Then I'm just sitting there just with all my AI agents doing my work for me, really. But they're not actually, they're executing on what I'm asking them to do. And they never get it 100% right the first time. So now I need to go back in, check that. But now I'm doing three pieces of work at the same time. So by midday, I'm just done, because there's so much that I've had to consider that I don't think that's sustainable. And I think that we're not talking about this enough, but I bet you in the next 3 months, people are going to start talking about AI burnout. I've already had a couple of kind of videos that I've seen or blogs that I've read where people are talking about this idea that AI is going to give you more time back so that you can do the more strategic work. But if AI is supporting you to deliver on a task, you're having to watch it and wait for it to do its thing so that you can again give it feedback on Simple AI, if you run a playbook, it's now gone through, it takes a few seconds for it to go through and give you all its output, and then you've got the issues one by one. Then you've got to go through the issues, you've got to check the issues, and then you're going to refine them. And every time you refine them, you have to wait a bit. So I think we have to find better ways of working with AI that are totally different to what we're used to. And this generation has gone from working 5 days in the office to some sort of hybrid solution to maybe back 5 days in the office or fully remote. And now AI is in the mix. So there's just so much change in such a short space of time. I think there's going to be a huge topic around this in the near future.
Completely. And it's one of the things that irritates me the most about some of the hype you see about, the technology being able to do it is one thing. The people following it and being able to use the technology is a different thing. And the time lag can be 5, 6, 7 years, and it always has been. So the technology being able to do it, and actually the humans being able to cope with it is two very different things. And the kind of that supervision of agents thing, I think that the best way for someone who hasn't experienced that, they've not gone that far down that rabbit hole, is think about having like a 20-person team. And there will be people here who have had that, and you can't do the work anymore because you're so busy supervising everyone. So imagine having a 20-person team that's able to execute a week of work in a day, and then you have to supervise all of it. And that can kind of put it in perspective, like just how much of a mental drain it can
Yeah,
get if you're not
that's great.
careful.
That's such a great analogy that everyone can relate to who's ever managed people. And you do kind of get people that are really good at their jobs, they're really good at executing. And now you've made them responsible for other people. You haven't necessarily put them through the right training to be responsible for other people. And now they're finding it quite dissatisfying that they're not able to do the work that they were really good at. And now they have to manage people, which, as we all know, is the hardest thing about having a job. When you have to manage people, it's so difficult, emotionally draining. So and of course it can be very rewarding, but it can really take its toll on you as well. And I think doing that in an AI world can be even more intense because you can manage unlimited AI agents and you can have unlimited AI projects that are running in parallel, and you need to be quite aware of what you're doing. And Stephanie's just published or just shared with us an article. That's the one that I read, Stephanie. So thank you for bringing that up because I couldn't remember what it is that I had read, but that's the one. That's brilliant. And everyone, please take a copy and paste of that. And Beth, hi, good to see you here. Beth saying, I'm currently facing the reality of the business quasi lawyers building their own contract reviewing tools and pitching them to the business as free compared to the license cost of a bought solution. I'm open to considering a homemade tool, but I want to make sure we're being honest about the cost, immediate and ongoing, about building our own tool, specifically a contract review tool, so that we can do a fair comparison of cost. Has anyone seen a good summary or comparison or list of things to help illustrate this fairly? No, but Beth, I'm going to write that because I think that's brilliant and that's a really useful tool to share with people. I actually vibe coded something that I'm gonna Dory's in the background, but I vibe coded like an interactive tool that you can use to assess whether build or buy is sensible. So yeah, Dory, thank you for putting that here. Yeah, please do drop the build versus buy page now in here. Um,
Yeah, the other thing to add to that mix on the buy versus build, I think there's a question to be asked about why you're doing it as well.
mhm,
Um, because I think if you really need to get, if you need complete control of the user experience, then absolutely you should be building because no off-the-shelf tool is ever going to give you that. Most people don't need that control. Um, so and that, that is probably the fundamentally number one question I think everyone should be asking themselves if they're thinking about building something. And then I think the second thing is how far do you want to get? Because if you want to build something that's super integrated with all your systems and it's going to make a massive efficiency impact, then again you probably do need to be building. But actually, if you're only looking for an incremental improvement, you probably don't need to be building that.
mhm.
So I think those two things are really important to think about as well, especially the user experience one.
Definitely. I would love to open this up to the audience. Any questions that you have, any thoughts, comments, anything, any ideas that have been triggered by this conversation, please do share. We do want to make this interactive, and this is not our usual style of webinar. This is more of a conversation, and we'd like you to be involved. So please feel free to use this opportunity to ask us anything that you might want to talk about in more detail. So, so Chris, where do you see, so vibe coding is obviously, first of all, the name. I understand why people want to move slightly towards something that feels a bit more serious because I think vibe coding for a software engineer might feel like it's undermining what they're actually doing and how they're using it. But today I was talking to our legal engineering team and we were talking about agentic AI. Vibe coding is one thing, but how do you see agentic AI in the realm of vibe coding? How is that what are people gonna start doing with it that they can't do today in the next year, do you think?
In terms of agentic, or
Yes.
um, it's tricky. So if you actually look at why vibe coding or agentic engineering has got so good, um, it's actually not really about the AI getting better. It's actually about what people are now calling like the harness that you put around it. So it's how does it validate its own work? Um, how does it access precedent of what's done before? How does it access knowledge about how this particular engineer or engineering team likes doing the work? How does it test its output at the end? Um, the thing that's made the big leap is that it's the giving AI access to those tools, to that knowledge via kind of agentic AI. Um, Honestly, I think we've got a lot of catching up to do in legal, and I think it's going to take much more than a year. Um, so I don't know whether we'll actually see that much improvement in legal over the next year, just because there's so much work to do to get to the point where you could even be close to vibe lawyering in the same way. But I'm an eternal pessimist, I think. Or real I prefer realist. I prefer
Mm.
realist. But yeah, I think that's my really honest answer. I think there's a lot of work to do under the hood before we can expect it to have a huge impact in legal in the same way it has in engineering.
Okay. Um, so Anna, hi Anna. You mentioned the promise of less work with AI, but right now, just getting up to speed on AI tools feels overwhelming on top of all the BAU work. In this transition moment, how can companies support employees to make the jump? I mean, yeah, Chris, you mentioned the training tool on vibecode.law, and that training tool is an AI version of supporting younger lawyers to get up to speed. But is there a training resource out there that helps lawyers who are already doing the work to get up to speed with AI?
I have actually not seen much. I think there's
Yeah,
a lot of pockets of it. I think there's a lot of pockets of it, and you see it pop up every now and again on LinkedIn. But no, I don't think there are that many really good central hubs. I have heard of what's a do you know you've sure you know of Peter Duffy?
yeah,
He's
it's
very
great.
prevalent on LinkedIn. Yeah, he's
Yeah.
been very involved with Factor,
Hmm.
who have put together a training course. I think it is a paid thing. It's an enterprise license thing, but that's possibly worth a look. And Peter's
Yeah,
very, very, very good people.
very
Very
good people.
knowledgeable guy.
And he's got a
Um,
stack that I highly recommend you subscribe to, because he does some really rich content, and I'm just in awe of Peter. So Anna, I would sort of ask, what is it that you want to get up to speed to? Is it a feeling that there's so much noise and you want to just be in the know of what AI tools are out there? Are you talking about software solutions in particular and what they can do for you? Are you talking about how you can use your internal AI to leverage what you've already got to build tools? I think that sometimes we get FOMO because we're hearing all this stuff, but we're not. I think maybe just a different way of putting it is, what are the problems that you're trying to solve? And then from there, think about what solutions you can deploy. Um, but yeah, and Anna, we can share we have a Simple AI Academy. So Dory, if you don't mind sharing that, that's just a step by step on how to use Simple AI, but it is also meant to be a more general reference point for how you can use AI contract review tools. Um, Karina saying, my problem is that I struggle to explain to IT what I want the tool to do after I've dumped all my ideas into the AI and built the prototype. Are there any best practices or tips you can share on how to document your vibe coding project?
this is a really interesting one. And I'm going to give it seems like a really silly answer, but I promise you it's a really good answer because I've done it myself with stuff I've built. Just ask the vibe coding tool to create the documentation for you as a first stab. Um, because if you can basically say, look, this is the problem I have. I need to explain to IT what it is I've built, so they can understand what I built. Please, can you put this documentation together? This is kind of what I want to get out of it, and it will have a pretty good stab at it. No problem whatsoever because it's got all of the code to look at. It's got your chat history to look at as to how you were
Mm.
talking to it about the problem. So it'll probably put together a pretty good first stab at that. It's one of those I always call it like blank page syndrome. Like
Mm.
if you've got a blank sheet of paper and you need to document something, it's very, very hard to do. But if AI does even a semi good job at documenting it, you can react to that and tweak it.
Hmm. Yeah, definitely. I've done that before as well. So where I've vibe coded a tool that I then wanted to put into production, I created a specification document. After I vibe coded it, I just asked Claude to create the spec, and then I took the spec and then I gave it to the engineering team, and then they can take it from there. So thank you for that, Chris. Beth, you're saying we're definitely talking about an initial phase of more work, more people before we can reduce headcount due to reliance on tech. And right now we have to do all the work we've always had to do and also try and build, test, refine, pilot, change manage, etc., point solutions. Totally feel this.
Yeah.
And I feel like we're going through this phase where particularly lawyers, they're just a little bit fatigued by it all. And AI just feels like another job. I think this is so normal with any transition, and it's just indicative of an enormous change that we're undergoing. Um, but yeah, hopefully resources that are out there can help you decipher some of the noise and cut out some of the noise and decipher some of the complexity, I meant to say, because it is quite complicated and hard, and it feels like it's high risk. Yuri, how to handle the support problem. If the person who created a tool leaves the company, it can make the tool very difficult to support and expand. This is a problem, right? This is
I've
a
got a
problem.
fun anecdote about this. Um, I built an Excel tool for my old firm, probably coming up not far off 10 years ago. I still get calls about it every now and again. I left that organization a long time ago, but it's such a valid point. And you
Yeah,
need to capture that knowledge, at the point of creation. Because even if the person is still in the business, if they created a tool a year ago, they've probably already forgotten how it works to at least to an extent. So yeah, I think if you are building stuff, you need to try and capture that know-how as close to the point of creation as possible.
yeah.
And yeah, it's the old Excel macro problem of yesteryear.
I know someone who really should have lost his job and he did not because he was responsible for that macro. So, it's a good way to keep a job. You've built the tool, you've got to say. Um, Do you feel the building and honing of the harness architecture you mentioned, Chris, is where the IPR value moat sits moving forward into the agentic era, protecting via trade secrets, for example, rather than in the past, where we may have seen more value within software engineering and copyright, but now everything can be created so quickly?
I think it's yeah, a great question. Yes, to a degree, yes. I think I guess it depends what you mean, but the actual kind of architecture of how it works, how that harness works, I think will become quite commoditized, and it already kind of is to a degree. Like Claude, just I don't know, probably lost amongst all the other Claude announcements over the last few weeks, but they've just released a managed agent product which kind
Mhm.
of gives you the building blocks for that harness. But I think the IP is actually in all the stuff that sits underneath the harness. The stuff that the harness is calling to for it's the expertise that sits underneath it. And there's still so much work to be done to kind of put like legal knowledge, what's in our brains, in a format that's actually usable in the same way that kind of coding tools
Yeah,
are able to.
yeah, I think that this is going to be a whole new realm for IP law, just in general. I think there's just so much values being created in such different ways, and what used to be value will no longer be value because it's no longer the moat. So I think that's a really interesting space. Um, Someone is mentioning Copilot and how it is slightly hopeless. We ran a webinar. It was our most popular webinar, where we compared a contract review activity across ChatGPT, Claude, Gemini, and Simple AI. And Dory, if you don't mind dropping the recording of that webinar, if it's on YouTube here, that would be great. We're releasing a report after that webinar to explain the differences and what we found. But prior to that, we also did a survey, and people that used Copilot had the least trust in the tool, but the largest adoption. So that's really interesting. Most people are using Copilot because it's just embedded, but they're the ones that trust the tool the least. So Yeah. Tim Lenz has got an interesting point. We're in an RFP for a full enterprise CLM for our organization of 6 companies. We're now making an organization-wide commitment to use foundational AI. That's brave. And one senior leader recommended we use Claude to build the CLM solution. I'm not familiar with vibe coding. I assume we would need to accumulate detailed technical knowledge of what. Yeah. Tim, that gives me anxiety. I'm sorry to be
It
so
gets
straight up, but that gives me anxiety because if you build your own CLM, then you're going to need to have a person that is going to manage that code thereafter. So you're going to need to bring someone who CLM is so broad, complex. People don't even really understand what CLM means. Does it have a legal front door? Does it not have a legal front door? Is it a document management system of the end-to-end workflow from intake to creation to review to what do you actually want from this? So you trying to figure out what features you're going to build is going to be loads of hard work. And then even once you've managed to deploy it, which will take ages across 6 organizations, 6 companies, I think that it might be very hard to manage thereafter as people ask for different things. Um, so yeah, that is a very brave decision. Um, One senior leader recommended, yeah, I'm not familiar with what, sorry, yeah, I'm just rereading the last bit. We would also need to maintain the app and continue to grow as legal landscape changes. I assume it's not just one software engineer that will be needed, but lots of people. Correct. Yeah, it will probably be
yeah,
a lot more of an expensive affair than just buying it off the shelf.
yeah.
Um, okay, we have 7 minutes left. Chris, any last words on, the evolution of vibe coding? Um, Anything else that you'd like to touch upon before we go?
Um, that's very open.
Just open that.
Um,
What are your predictions for
all predictions. Okay.
where we're going to be in the next year as a legal community? What kind of conversations are we going to be having? Not just about vibe coding, but AI and the practice of law in general.
I think this is a prediction slash my hopeful answer.
Yeah.
I think we need to be talking a lot more about the operating model that goes around the work. You know, the thread that, if we think back to that conversation about, how do you manage all of this work as a human when there's so much work? You can't. You just can't. Like the operating model of how we do the work has to change. And I want to see a lot more discourse about that. The work behind the work that's actually going to unlock the kind of value that LLMs can offer. I want to see a lot more people talking about service design. How do we design a service from end to end? What's the outcome we want? Working it backwards from there. How do we hand off between human agent back to human to client? Like we need to be talking about that a lot more.
I love that. And I'm going to say this now because I want to hold myself to account. I started writing a book called Legal by Design. And the whole point of the book is that in-house legal was not designed. It was inherited. It's an inherited model that we took from law firms and we kind of adapted. And then we've just taken this and run with it. And now we're at a point where we have to rethink it. I mean, we were at that point 10 years ago, but there wasn't the urgency. But now AI has created urgency and we need to rethink the model, the operating model for legal, exactly what you've just said. So I'll send you a copy when it's
This
done.
wasn't pre-planned, everyone, I
It's
swear.
not, this is not like a covert dropping a hint from the book. But yeah, so this is just, I totally agree that this is the problem. We're just going to try and patch existing ways of working with AI. What we really need to do is think about how we work, what our role is as in-house lawyers, who we're trying to serve, how do we scale ourselves? Because up until now, it's just not been scalable. And how do we create an infrastructure that's going to support us in the way that we want to do the jobs that we want to be doing?
And I
Uh,
think a really important part of that is having a really honest conversation with both yourself, your team, and your stakeholders about the trade-offs,
yeah,
because you can't achieve that level of efficiency without trade-offs. It's a recipe for making yourself go mad. So
absolutely.
we need
And
to have that honest conversation.
yeah, and there's so much in that, like stuff that we carry with us about what we think our roles should be and how we should be supported. Yes, I will, Sarah, I will send you that book. In the meantime, I have a Substack. that you can subscribe to. So Dory, if you don't mind just dropping that here. And yes, what advice can you give? Hi, Christopher. What advice can you give for legal teams whose business colleagues are using LLMs ineffectively and bypassing legal? God, what a nightmare. Are there any
Yeah.
resources you can point to, so do's and don'ts that can be understood easily by non-lawyers? Someone actually asked me to write a blog about this when we did our last webinar on GPT because they had the exact same complaint. She actually had a small law firm and her clients kept sending her documents that had been created with ChatGPT going, can you just give this a once over? And she's like, no, this is going in the bin because this is not a legal document that I'm going to stand behind. I need to do the work from scratch because I'm going to I'm accountable for this. So I'm going to write, I've written the blog, Christopher. I just need to publish it. So I'm just going to make a note to send you the blog when I've written it, when I published it.
There's
Um,
an interesting one there about doing a bit of, not necessarily deep analysis, but like what are the use cases that people are doing that for, and why are they doing it?
yeah,
I'd say because we had a conversation with a client recently about statements of work, and it was basically the business were trying to get statements of work out really really quickly. Um, and actually, the answer was reasonably simple. Like the legal team wasn't looking at those statements of work anyway; they didn't have the time to. But actually giving the business like a good prompt, you know, if you could use it, fine, but at least make sure it's looking for the right things. So they just co-created a prompt with the business to basically, so we were always looking at the same stuff. So I think it's worth doing a bit of a dive into, the ones where you're seeing the same thing come up again and again and again, and see if there's
yeah.
a solution that gets you halfway there.
That's a great one because as in-house lawyers, when you're inundated, you have to be quite discerning about what you look at and what you don't. And then for the stuff that you already don't look at, then you're actually creating an additional layer of security if you do allow
Yeah.
them to use an LLM in the way that you've directed. And I think that's the shift that we're going to see. Legal's going to take much less of an execution role and much more of a building guardrails to enable the business to self-serve role. So we need to move from executing to designing and architecting and yeah, being very deliberate about what we do in an organization. If you want to deter non-lawyers from using LLMs for legal advice, maybe point them to all the cases where lawyers have done that and it has gone horribly and expensively wrong. Good point. Yeah. Okay, we've got a minute left. Thank you all for joining today's conversation. It was great to have such great attendance from everyone and such great participation. Very much appreciated. Chris, it's been an absolute pleasure to have you. We had a really good chat the first time we agreed to do this, and today was even better, which is unbelievable. But yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
Great. Okay. Thank you. Thanks, everyone. And we will see you soon. Take care.
Cheers.
Bye.